Thank you so much, Tony. Thank you.
Great to see you.
Morning, everybody. Okay, so to follow John Medina, nightmare. To follow a politician, not so much. To follow that group of students, I'm going home now. And by the way, I don't want to be controversial, although I might be controversial, so forgive me. As I was listening to the presentation this morning, and I know, we're talking about a variety of experiences and contexts and purposes and jobs. Having listened to two inputs already this morning, I know who I'd like to run education policy, not just in Australia, but around the world. And I'd like to talk to you, by the way, I know, we all think, because as educators, standing in front of an audience of educators after you've heard from a group of students is frankly a nightmare, because everyone in the room's instinct is, oh my God, those young people are extraordinary. How many of you are parents? Can you put up your hands? How many of you are parents of or have survived having teenagers? Because I just want to remind you all that while we heard these stunning young people here, I can imagine what their bedrooms look like. I'm not passing judgment, but there you go. And the reason I say this is because the reason I travel around the world, I think, is because I have two teenagers at home. Okay, one of whom is a teenager who's just left, actually. My daughter's a year older than you. She's just started university. I spoke to her the other day via Skype, and don't listen to this bit. She was hungover. She was feeling ill and was eating cold pizza for breakfast. So she's settled into university life really nicely. But just reminding me as you were talking, recently, my wife and I, just before the end of the school year, went to her final parent consultation evening. Now, those of us that have endured parent consultation evenings as parents will know what I'm talking about when I say it was a moment of celebration for my wife and I. That, at least for the institution, because I'm not going to my son's parents' evenings. I don't care about his education, frankly. I've given up caring, to be fair. You know that thing, the cattle market, you're kind of walking round, aren't you, waiting for the gap to appear, and ninja parents seem to get to the desks first, and the rest of us poor souls that are busy texting, talking to our friends about how we'd rather down the pub than talking about our daughter's education, miss the opportunity. We went to our last one recently, and the teacher that I was particularly interested in talking to was my daughter's history teacher. Because my daughter's history teacher has been her hero since she was about 13. Since she went to bed on the eve of her 13th birthday, and I was her hero, and woke up on her 13th birthday to discover that, frankly, I was just a crass embarrassment. This is the teacher, and we've all had to endure this as parents. I mean, some of you will be the teacher heroes, and I hate you. When our children come home, and they're so patronizing, so wonderfully patronizing, aren't they? Because they say things to us like, oh, Mr. So-and-so's so funny. He's so fun, and he's so clever. So clever. This morning we were studying, and you go, oh, yes. And then she'll say to you, but I can't tell you about it. You wouldn't understand. So I wanted to see this guy, frankly, just to punch him. We went to parents' evening. We're there, we sit down because my wife is a ninja parent. She got in early, she got in half an hour before her meeting time. We're sat there. And it turns out that my history teacher loves my daughter as much as she loves him. Because he started off by saying, your daughter is one of the most remarkable students I've ever had the privilege. Now, I know, I've been a teacher, I know this is bullshit, right? I know that we come out with this stuff all the time. We say this when we can't think of anything really important to say. I know this, it's fine. So he's saying, remarkable things about my daughter, unbelievable. And the thing he said, you see, what he got round to was, he said, her essay writing in particular is extraordinary. It's extraordinary because she manages to find a whole range of viewpoints and complex arguments for every essay that we set her. And that ability to see things from so many different perspectives, he said, I find truly unique. Now, as he was talking about the genius of my daughter, I started giggling. And I started giggling because I know how my daughter does her homework. And you see, at the same time I started giggling, my wife did something she's not done in 21 years of marriage. She took my hand and held it tenderly under the table. Now, because I'm a man of a certain age, I thought, let's go home, it must be my birthday. Clearly, I misread. Because all that was coming out now was blah, 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 blah. I misread the situation because she knew why I was giggling too, you see. She knew that the reason I was giggling was because I knew how much, and she was worried that I was going to say something. And I realized I'd misread the situation as the third knuckle on my hand began to crack. So let me tell you about my daughter's homework, right? This is how it goes. She gets set her assignment. She comes home, goes to her bedroom, taps into her computer, the title of her assignment. She currently has, across a whole range of social networks, some of which I've never heard of, about 4,500, 5,000 friends. And she tells them what her history essay assignment is. Then, because we're a middle-class home, she goes downstairs and makes herself a cup of frothy coffee. I never did that at 18, did you? Frothy coffee, right, frothy coffee. And then she goes back to her bedroom, about 5 minutes later. And her history essay has been populated for her. Interestingly, if she's talking about the Russian Revolution, friends she's got in Russia have given them their insights into the Russian Revolution. Now, the interesting thing is that many traditionalists would tell us that my daughter was cheating. I would suggest that she was demonstrating many of the skills that 21st century employers would absolutely cut their right arms off from their graduate employees. Because what she's not doing is just cutting and pasting and plagiarizing. She's then applying a huge range of skills, of course, which is, let me edit this, let me screen it, let me find the stuff that really values, let me find the way I can put this stuff together in an argument that makes my point. So you see, when I talk about edupreneurship, one of the things I think we need to do more, and it was so unbelievably brilliantly demonstrated this morning already. Thank you so much for making my life a bloody nightmare. Was actually, there are many entrepreneurs, many edupreneurs in our schools already. The problem is, most of them are under 18 years of age. And one of the things I think we need to do, as the slides come up, hopefully, in a second, because that's a horrible bald spot, isn't it? I didn't think I had that. I need to get myself a thing. Note to self before my next speech. The problem we have with all of this, right, is the world is changing, and by the way, it's changing organically. I'm not going to talk in detail about change today, but one of the things that really frustrates me about change is people seem to think it's something that happens in a policy or a structure or a system every few years, and that somehow change is an invention of the 21st century. A ridiculous notion. How on earth did we end up in such a beautifully architecturally designed building in such incredible seats if the world hadn't always been changing? We'd still be in a cave somewhere. So it's not a 21st century invention. But what I do believe has happened is I think we've kind of hit a tipping point, because I think the rate of change has become so exponential, partly because of technology, which has led to a kind of globalization, which has led to all kinds of other stuff. I think the tipping point we've arrived at is we're now at a place, and this is very interesting, because listening to John yesterday reference this, and by God, wasn't he just extraordinary? I mean, that man should be the most important voice in education. And the reason I say that is because we've kind of passionately believed a lot of what he was saying before now. But now we have his science to help support that what we thought before was instinct is actually fact. And that, for me, is one of the most powerful things about listening to John yesterday. Right, so the point is that I think the world is moving so fast now. I wonder whether the biggest problem for us is, for the first time in human history, the vast majority of people feel they've lost control. That actually we can't keep up any longer. That change is almost happening faster than we can deal with it. Now, when that happens, and of course, John, I can't go into the science, I'm not an expert in the way that John is, but it strikes me from a very human perspective that when that happens, when you start to feel disenfranchised, that's when the fear clicks in. And it strikes me that when we're talking about change to our colleagues, that's their first reaction. Because their first reaction is, it's not change as in an active process. It's not an entrepreneurial process. Most of our colleagues see change as something that happens to them. You know, it's very interesting listening to the minister reference the number of changes. I don't know what he said, 70 or something in teacher agency in the last, you know. Just let me up the ante. Tony will know this. Under the last government in the UK, unfortunately it was still the UK then, still is, thankfully. Under the last Labour government, in 13 years of Labour government, there were over 700 major government initiatives in primary education alone. So what happens is, we become very adverse to change because we think change is somebody else's agenda. We think change is controlled by somebody else. And what that leads to is a desire in us, because of the pressure we're under, to constantly seek out the silver bullet. Just tell me. Just tell me what the answer is, please. How many of you have been in meetings with your colleagues where they've turned around to you and gone, look, we get it. Just tell us what you need us to do. Because their perception is they're going to have to do something on top of what they've already done. It's more work. It's more implied stuff pushed on them by somebody else. And for me, the job of an edupreneur is actually our greatest challenge possibly in human leadership, which is to move beyond the silver bullet.